What problem are we solving today? This is for those who are beautiful, nice people who get played, betrayed, and dismayed. It's time to take back your power. I know you might be thinking no more, Mr. Nice Guy. Not quite. Aggressiveness is the other side of the nice coin. Oh, we're capable of aggressive behavior. That part of us often comes out when our bucket is full or just tired of accommodating others. Besides, the world has far too many aggressive people who don't give animosity a second thought. Today is about growing into a part of you that is and was always there, waiting for you to come back and reclaim it, and that's wise love. There's a deeper part of you that knows how to navigate difficult situations in the best way, and a part of you that is so loving it is love. If that doesn't resonate, don't worry. I'll show you a process for pulling back the curtains so you get to know that part of you again. Let's return to unskillful niceness, where we give our power away for approval. Unskillful niceness is a combination of love and fear. On the love side, you feel for people. You don't like to see them hurting. That's empathetic love, and it's wonderful you bring that to the world. The fear part of niceness that wants approval so much that you might neglect your own needs and boundaries. When you fear that you're not lovable enough or good enough, you compensate in ways that don't serve you. When our need for approval is trying to compensate for a perceived self-love deficit, we can't hear our deepest wisdom and end up acting out of flight or fighting impulses. When the fear of disapproval results in a type of niceness that lets people walk over you, you're not living your best life. Where did this unskillful form of niceness come from? You probably grew up in a home where criticism, neglect, perfectionism, and punishment were the norm. In my case, I walked on eggshells around a harsh father who got triggered easily because of his own unresolved issues. And his religion taught him his anger was okay because if you spared the rod, you spoil the kid. Let's say that didn't work out well for me. We learned responses that served a need at the time. Tiptoeing around an easily triggered man served my survival needs. Often, we learned to please others to avoid conflict and in endless streams of criticism, not to mention how we were ignored when we needed it most. The neglect fuels the core belief that you weren't lovable and weren't okay, but if you could get some validation from others, then you'd feel better. Okay, so we learned a set of behaviors that we now recognize don't serve us. How do we relearn new behaviors or unwrap this core love and wisdom I've been talking about? Step 1. Open up awareness. Let's start by repacking our bags by allowing awareness to speak to us about when and why we act in this unskillful form of niceness. Think of situations where you acted in an unskillful form of niceness. Pick the earliest situation you can remember. Watch the situation as a movie with you in the audience. What was the trigger? Or in other words, what prompted you to move into a niceness response? When we relax into awareness and allow ourselves to see the situation fully, there's a lot to take in. Of course, a little boy would turn to walking on eggshells around an easily angered large man. My father was doing the best he could, trying to deal with his own neglect and lack of respect in his family of origin. I noticed that I really only had one response at the time, and that was to put my head down and weather the storm. I learned a response. If I learned a response, I can learn a new response. And it starts with awareness. Each time I relax into awareness and watch scenarios, I notice a pit in my stomach when someone is acting aggressively. When I meet someone new who I want to impress, I notice myself bringing the need for approval into the situation. I can notice that need as a feeling in my body. Approval feels better than non-approval. I can teach myself to react with more skill. Becoming aware of triggers opens me up to imagine different responses. In my case, I can see 3 responses. 1 is to withdraw or appease, and 2 is a form of aggressiveness, and my 3rd response is imaging the wisest, most powerful response. I've acted from that place, and I know what wise love feels like. It's like tough love. You're candid yet very aware of your outcome and empathy for the other person. I'm hinting at step 2, so let's unwrap. Step 2, reimagine more skillful responses. I can use my imagination to see myself acting more skillfully at the trigger points. In the brain, what fires together wires together. This means that you can train your brain, like Pavlov's dogs, to respond to a trigger or stimulus. Imagining and doing use the same neural networks. That's why studies confirm that mental practice is as effective as physical. So start with your imagination and see the trigger firing with a more skillful response. If you normally put on your nice when someone gets aggressive, imagine the moment you feel triggered to go nice and see yourself acting with wise, assertive love. If this is difficult, imagine someone you admire acting in the same situation. I watched a nursing care supervisor deal with old, aggressive patients in a wise, powerful, caring way. Someone is a bit cranky today. Let's get you to bed, Fred. And they held their ground and lovingly yet assertively leaned into the situation and managed the cranky person. But what if that cranky person is your boss? Imagine it. Take yourself into the trigger moment where your boss is leaning over you and speaking aggressively. Of course, you'll have a reaction, perhaps one like you did with an aggressive parent or caretaker. And you can imagine yourself responding more skillfully. See the trigger moment when you react emotionally, then see yourself relaxing into a wise, assertive, loving response. I imagine myself leaning into this situation to learn rather than withdrawing. Then I see myself aware of options and choosing the best one based on the situation. Sometimes the best response is to say nothing. Or it's aggression. Or the best response is tough love or being like the nursing assistant who helps grandpa to bed. If you can picture it and associate that image with the trigger moment, you can relearn your response. Have you ever leaned into an awkward situation with confidence and curiosity? Then you know how powerful that can be. Reimagining your response to a trigger puts you on the path to change, but normally, you need to do a few more things. Step 3. Imagine in the most powerful way. When you imagine more skillful responses, how does that feel? We can imagine it in a way that doesn't really get through to the subconscious, and a way that opens up the communication pathways. It's time to crank up the communication power to the subconscious mind. 4 things can open up communication with your subconscious mind. First is your emotional state. If you feel pleasure at the thought of doing the more skillful behavior, your subconscious gets very interested. How does it feel when you imagine the more skillful behavior in this wise love? If your mind associates pleasure with a powerfully wise, loving response, your brain will begin to rewire. Second, you crank up the power to the subconscious when you're relaxed. So feel good and relaxed as you imagine more skillful responses. Please note that hating your old behavior doesn't change it, but strengthens it. You would think it lets your brain know that you don't want that, but that's not how your brain works. De-energize the old when you see past responses as you are doing the best you can under the circumstances. In other words, let yourself off the hook for behaving unskillfully. By the way, I did the same for my father because I sensed barriers to adopting new beliefs and behaviors when I felt anger at his choices. Let yourself and others off the hook. Let go. Third, your subconscious mind can be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic in how it prefers to accept information. The easiest way to implement this is to use visual images when you imagine, but add sound and body sensations to the mix to make it more powerful. Fourth, we power up the subconscious mind's communication with repetition. Show up and do this often. I schedule time each day, usually in the early morning, to be relaxed and grateful, imagining myself in a trigger situation, acting out myself in wise love with sounds, and feeling them in my body as much as possible. That brings us to the next step. Step 4, act in the new. Acting in new ways reinforces these behaviors in your subconscious. It won't be perfect, but the intent of the action speaks volumes to your subconscious. Life happens and you find yourself feeling awkward in a situation. That trigger shows up. You used to shrink into niceness, but now you're practicing a new vibe, wise love. So you lean in with eyes wide open. You sense that you are both confident and not so confident. Yet your intent is to navigate with wise love, powerful and empathetic. You experiment. You do your best and see how it works out. You get feedback. With that feedback, you do the next step, which is Step 5, experiment and adjust. You've done this before with learning to ride a bike or so many other things. You imagine, then try, then adjust as you continue to walk out the intent to behave differently. In awkward situations, you show up with tough love, and it works out or it doesn't. You don't condemn yourself or abandon the intent of the more skillful behavior, but it is time to learn. What would have been the most skillful behavior in this situation? We've been experimenting and adjusting our whole lives. When it comes to replacing unskillful niceness with more skillful, wise love, you follow the same process you used to learn how to ride a bike. You adjust. You try new things. You get traction, or better yet, do more of what you've done before, just not as often as you'd like. Repetition, physically or with imagination, associated with positive emotion and review and adjustment, wins the day. Does this 5-step process work? Of course. You've been using a form of this process throughout your life. To review, become aware of what triggers the behaviors we're calling unskillful niceness. We can't change what we're not aware of. Look at your deeper motives, desires, and beliefs. Allow yourself to see it all with compassion and clarity. There's a part of you that can see clearly what's going on in and with your energy, so use it. Step 2, imagine more skillful responses. Step 3, imagine those responses associated with pleasurable emotions. You can do this by first getting into those emotional states, or seeing the payoff for doing the new behavior in a way that communicates with your subconscious. Step 4, walk it out. Do it. Practice. In Step 5, adjust as you would with any skill. If your niceness has resulted in being played, controlled, used, and abused, it's time to turn the page to wise love. Don't lose the goodness that has always been there. Evolve your energy to tap into your authentic power. You can see what's going on clearly? Imagine more skillful behaviors in the most powerful way possible. Try it and adjust. Thanks for joining us today at the Change Capability Institute, where we help you live your best life.